Hello, Angeli.
I've been wondering, how would you go about defining what awareness is?
Well, not very well, I suppose. Um, that's because awareness is a fundamental term. There are things that you can't define because they're simply fundamental. What do I mean by that? Things like space. You can't define space without using space as part of the definition. Um, or time, for that matter. I mean, what is time? It's a fundamental property, and you can't define it without referring to something else. Um, it was Einstein who said time is what clocks measure. Pretty good definition, but awareness is in the same category. Now, we all have our own definitions or our practical definitions of awareness. That means to be, to some degree, aware, awake, have one's senses open, to be able to think and compare things and use the mind. Those are all practical definitions, but finally they all um, come down to the question about what really is awareness. And awareness is consciousness, and that is a fundamental property of existence. And fundamental properties of existence can't really be defined. But we all have our own definitions, and those sort of hint at what the big definition is.
Interesting point you mentioned about defining awareness is almost an impossible task. But I wonder, how can one understand what awareness is? Because often we understand things by its definition.
Yes, well, that's something the mind does, and the mind will sort these things out and compare them and put them in certain order and hierarchy in an attempt to draw a conclusion or understand a particular principle. But that understanding finally isn't part of the mind. The mind shows this to that which understands, and that which understands understands. But it's not part of the thinking process. That's a very important principle that all of us should be aware of, that understanding is not a matter of thinking. And you can demonstrate this quite easily, as many of our friends do, by asking the question, do you exist? Or are you awake? Are you aware? The answer comes immediately. And it isn't a matter of thinking. In fact, thinking really just sort of gets in the way. It's something you know that's true and you respond to instantly. Well, that's understanding. Now you can talk about it a lot. You can make up words to describe it and concepts to kick it about for a while, and that's sometimes interesting and often a lot of fun. But finally, it's a principle that has to be recognized rather than explained.
Does awareness have levels?
Mm. There's a lot of discussion um, over a long time in the religious and mystical literature about various levels of awareness, different numbers of heavens, different states, and all of those are interesting, and I really don't know what some of those authors are describing other than a personal experience and rendering it as best they can into words that they think are adequate or somewhat adequate to communicate their own experience. But finally, no, I think there is only finally awareness, which doesn't come in levels, because if it came in levels, there would have to be something other than awareness. It's often been described as um, objects are like waves on this ocean of awareness. And that's a good description, and that's helpful in many cases, but finally it can't be true, because there can't be any waves, because waves would be caused by something exterior or maybe internal, but that a different state would be required. Otherwise, a wave wouldn't occur. So finally, there aren't levels of awareness. There are certainly levels of experience, I would say.
In your personal experience, how did you come to realize this awareness?
For a long time, I didn't know what to call it. And I borrowed various names from various traditions and paths to try to situate and put words on my experience. But finally, I think awareness is the one that has stuck for me and is most adequate for my understanding of existence.
Would you think that someone else could call it something different but mean it the same?
I think that's entirely possible. People from different backgrounds who have different vocabularies and come from different cultures use different language to describe the same thing. Because they don't describe it in my terms doesn't mean their experience is invalid. And just because I don't experience it in the same way with the same parameters and the same objects doesn't mean that mine isn't valid. But sure, everyone can talk about that which we all know finally in different terms.
Does awareness has any limitations?
Awareness has no limitations other than one, and that is it can't be something other than awareness.
In your experience with awareness or being aware, what changed? What changes did you notice in your life when you became aware of this awareness?
I became happier. I became calmer. I felt less pressure to figure things out and know them, which is an intellectual point of view, and finally knowing awareness is not an intellectual activity. And it's like finally getting a joke, you know. It fits together, and there it is, and it was there all the time, but I finally got it. You know, it's like getting a joke.
So would you say that awareness gives someone a feeling or an emotion that they want or they seek?
I'd say different people have different reactions to their experience of knowing themselves and knowing awareness. And that's really about all I can say, particularly about others' experiences.
Well, thank you, Terry. It's been really
I hope that was helpful, Angela.
yes, and there's a lot more to come.
Well, I'll look forward to that.
Thank you.